It is time for Making Connections, and this is our weekly interview segment where we meet people right here in our community, making up the fabric of Korean society, and hear their stories. And from time to time, we also get special guests from overseas as well. And this week, we are very pleased to be joined by a special guest who is actually very well known in food circles. Many of our listeners will recognize him as one of the judges in the third season of Master Chef Korea. It is Chef Hooni Kim, New York-based Korean-American chef who is the first Michelin-starred chef in Korean cuisine. Good morning.
Good morning.
So happy to have you here, and thank you for getting up early and making your way to the studios.
No, thank you for having me.
So, Chef Hooni Kim, we met a couple of years ago, and that was when I think you were doing the Master Chef.
Yes.
And we're very thrilled to have you back here in Korea and involved in some more projects here. You have got a lot of projects going on, so hopefully we'll try to get through all of them. But let's start with your business or what your base is. You are based in New York, and I know that New York, of course, was hard hit, probably the most hard hit in America. And you have two restaurants there. Tell me, how have you been doing and your restaurant's been doing through all of this?
Yeah. Well, we've had to change course. I think right now New York is allowing 25% of capacity to be able to dine in. Well, that's the law. But after speaking with my staff, they weren't comfortable with serving people inside my restaurants just because it's a small restaurant.
Right.
So
Are we talking about Danji here?
Danji,
Okay.
yes. So at Danji, we're doing outdoor seating. We have about 5 tables outside in a tent with heaters.
Okay.
That keeps the restaurant open, and that allows us to keep 8 staff members who are making a living thanks to those 5 tables.
Right.
With Hanjan, we had to completely change the course in we don't serve customers for local delivery or dine-in, but what we do is we have a subscription of meal kits that are delivered via ourselves. I used to do the delivery when I was back in New York, but we deliver to about 100 families each week. And it's not just a small kit, it's a big kit that feeds the family for most of the week.
It's a proper Korean meal kit for the entire week. Then. Wow.
And that came about just because most of my stuff customers were parents, and they still wanted Korean food, and they weren't able to make it to my restaurant. So they asked if we could drop it off at their place, and that's how we started.
And I was thinking, it couldn't have come at a worse time. I mean, you're having to adapt and being creative with how you serve your food. But I would imagine with the greater interest in Korean culture in the U.S., with the Parasite, with BTS, with Korean culture just becoming so sort of prominent and kind of mainstream, I would imagine there would have been a greater interest in Korean food in general, even in New York too. So were you able to enjoy a bit of that before the pandemic? Or?
Well, New York is very forward when it comes to new cultures. And we've been feeling and experiencing the uptick in the popularity of Korean culture for a few years now.
Right.
Parasite was a big deal. But, for me, Korean food is not about a trend. It's the longer we're around, the more people are going to like it.
Right.
So it's not like we feel like we're missing out on a trend, but whenever things get back to normal, we're just going to pick up where we left off.
All right. Well, I wish you the best of luck with the 2 restaurants in New York. Now, in the midst of that, you have made your way here to Korea, and you're very busy here in Korea as well. So what brings you over here?
So my 2 restaurants, we have about 15 people on staff.
Okay.
And everything we make goes to the staff. So I haven't gotten a paycheck since March.
Oh, no.
So
you're here to earn some money?
I have mortgage. But, there was a program. I don't do a lot of TV shows because I feel like I'm a chef. I need to be where my restaurants are. But, our business being 10% of what it was, and my staff being, well, we're overstaffed over there in New York. I just felt like it was a good opportunity for me to come back to Korea and to, make a little bit of money.
I think everyone would understand that. And
Hope
I mean,
so.
and you don't have to be on site because the restaurants have been running for a while and they're fine without
and my
you.
staff have, I have staff from 9-10 years ago who are still there.
Okay.
So,
So let's talk about what you're doing here in Korea. Let's talk about this new TV program that you're involved with.
yeah, a normal program wouldn't have brought me back here. MasterChef Korea would not have brought me back here. This program is new. It is it's a survival program. It's a contest, and I'm a judge. But the contestants are foreign chefs living in Korea.
Oh, amateur or professional?
Professional. Most of them are chef
chefs.
owners, and a lot of them you probably even know. So these people, these chefs are competing to be the best foreign chef in Korea. And I was fortunate enough to be a part of this amazing program where, these chefs, they come from 24 different countries, I think, were represented. But a lot of them, they own restaurants and they have to sort of cook for Koreans. And I know that they weren't cooking some of the food that they really wanted to cook because you have to sort of
Adjust to local tastes.
But on the show, they do. I mean, grandmother's recipes. We tell them to... we tell them we don't want to eat food from your menu. We want to eat food that you wanted to cook, you want to share with Koreans that, we just haven't seen yet.
I can see how this appeals to you. You get to taste different foods from 24 different countries. But at the same time, if they're cooking their native food, it becomes very difficult to judge. How do you judge this when you're not familiar with it? You're one of the judges. I saw a photo, and it seems like the other two judges you're very familiar with, and you worked with them before, right? But they are Korean and Korea-based. How do you judge this then?
Well, my experience is I am not Korea-based, so I have a little bit more of a different eating experience than the other two judges. It's not about preference.
Okay.
It's not about a menu or a recipe.
Is it storytelling then?
It is about
A little bit of storytelling?
how well the chef can sort of even transport us to his homeland for the couple of minutes that we're enjoying his food. You're right. It is about him or her telling their story through food.
Amazing. I know that the variety and the quality of international cuisine that we can get here in Korea has improved so dramatically over the years. This should be very interesting. I mean, I didn't realize, though, 24 different countries should be very diverse, and we look forward to that. When can we see this show?
It is starting December 10th,
Okay.
Thursday, 9 p.m.
You're finished with all the filming?
We just finished on Sunday.
Oh, so the winner is out.
Yes.
Yeah. A little bit of a hint
No.
just for our listeners.
Well, the hint would be he's not Korean. Or she's not Korean.
Okay, but you kind of gave away that it's a he, I guess, maybe. All right. Well, let's move on because you're also here. And I've been following, and I know you have a lot of followers on social media, but I've been looking forward to this next sort of project. You have a book out. It's a cookbook that was actually released earlier this year and very simply called My Korea. And I understand that it did take you a long time. It was a labor of love for you. Tell us about this book.
So I started writing this book in 2013.
7 years ago?
Yes.
Okay.
I am not a writer.
It's a cookbook, though. It's mostly recipes, but yes, a little bit of storytelling in between, I guess.
There's a lot of storytelling.
Okay.
I think, part of my job with this book was I wanted readers to not only want to cook my recipes, but I wanted them to come to Korea.
Okay.
So a lot of the stories in the book are about my inspiration of why certain recipes or certain dishes made it onto my menu at either of my restaurants and also, as a part of part of this book. You know,
So the recipes that you feature are maybe the ones that you present at your restaurants as well as just your favorite sort of foods?
most of them, and ones that I like to cook at home, or ones that my son loves when I cook.
Right.
Just very personal
Okay.
menu items.
Let me ask you a very difficult question. What is your go-to comfort food for you personally then?
Comfort food. Wow.
Yeah.
I just feel Korean food itself is comfort food. At least the food that I enjoy in Korea. I would say tteokbokki is the sort of the street food that I enjoy most when I come to Korea. And also 된장찌개 and kimchi-jjigae.
Oh, yes.
I feel like Korean food, it's all about probiotics, fermentation, and the fermented foods taste differently when you're in Korea. It's the energy of this land that actually promotes the fermentation.
Wow.
And it's, I try to do the best I can in the US, but it's different.
Like you say, the tastes naturally have to change, I think, depending on where you get your ingredients, as well as you do have to cater somewhat to the local clientele, what they like. And your book, it says traditional flavors and modern recipes. So I'm wondering, it seemed like you were trying to cater it to a non-Korean audience because you wanted them to come to Korea as well.
Yes.
So with a lot of these Korean cookbooks, and I have a couple as well, but I find that they're a little difficult. For instance, if you're based overseas and they're geared for a foreign audience, they'll kind of be more, I guess, more relaxed with the ingredients. But then if you do that, this isn't what I tasted back in Korea. So there's that dilemma. And then the other one is, if you go sort of Korean, they're like, oh, a pinch of salt, a little bit of that, mix it around until you think it's done. It's not very clear for a non-Korean person or even a beginner cook like me. So who or what kind of, I guess, more sort of detailed kind of clientele or customer base or target audience are you aiming for with this book?
Oh, my, very good question. And this is probably the reason why it took me 7+ years to write. When I first started writing this book, we didn't have access to a lot of these great natural fermented ingredients in the U.S.
In the U.S., okay.
So it was.
We're talking about like
me,
chang, right? Like
yes,
된장 and
gochugaru and
gochugaru.
changirum. And for me as a chef, the first step is to be able to acquire these ingredients, and that's the first step to cooking.
They form the
getting these
base of your
ingredients.
dishes, I guess?
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
foundation.
Yeah. So without sharing to the readers how you get these ingredients, the book just wasn't making sense. So it took me a while, but now in the U.S., especially online, you can get some really great natural ingredients. So that's how, or the foundation of this book. It teaches you where to get these ingredients.
And could a beginner also try out these recipes? Do you think that, like for myself?
Yeah, one of the reasons why I worked with this publishing company is because they're famous for textbooks, like college textbooks. And like you said, Korean recipes, traditional Korean recipes are never about measurements and specific temperatures.
It's all 손맛.
Yeah. But that's not the way we cook in the U.S. That's not how modern cookbooks are. So I wanted the help of this company, this publishing company, to make sure my recipes were as detailed as any classic French cookbook. And, we got it done.
Very good. This is out here in Korea as well, so we can pick it up.
You know what? It's not supposed to be, just because my audience is not Korean.
Oh, right.
I wrote this book thinking about people who were not Korean, who I had to convince to fall in love with Korea and want to come here. So it's sold in every country in the world except for Korea. But, these bookstores in Korea are very resourceful.
Yes.
Ordering my book from online places in the U.S. So,
it's available
the
here.
major cookbooks, the major bookstores have it. Yeah.
Because it doesn't have to be just foreigners, I think. Even foreigners living here in Korea, or again, beginner chefs, amateur chefs, and there is a great interest in cooking, especially this year. So I think there would be a lot of interest. Maybe you can just think about directly importing it here to Korea. Let's move on. I do want to talk about your other project, which is working with 요리 천사. It's a nonprofit organization that you founded, and I see you very active with this even amidst your crazy schedule. So meaningful, I think. Tell us a little bit about this.
So we started about 4.5 years ago, and our objective was to train orphans into becoming chefs. So there's this one orphanage in 상도동, that we go every Tuesday. One of the 20 chefs that are part of 요리 천사, we take turns going every Tuesday to cook for them, because what we realized was before we train them how to be chefs, they have to want to be a chef.
Right.
And the only way they want to be a chef is they have to love food and fall in love with food. And they're not getting that with the food that they're eating
I
at
see.
the orphanage. So yeah, we have chefs who are cooking Italian food, Spanish food, Korean food, American food, and we, that's our job, to make them fall in love with food.
Hasn't it been hard during the pandemic to get support, or maybe more volunteers from chefs and companies?
Actually,
support?
the opposite. We've
Wow.
been having a hard time going into the orphanage
I see.
just because of the rules
Social
and
distancing,
restrictions. So we've actually started a second project. And the second project is we actually teach young adults with learning disabilities to how to cook for themselves. And that was actually an idea of one of the parents of these younger adults who have learning disabilities.
Okay.
And after the parents passed on, they were very worried how these kids were going to feed themselves.
Right.
So we are teaching them how to cook. We are making a YouTube video, a channel.
Very good.
So there's like 200,000 of these young adults with learning disabilities in Korea. So we want to, be able to reach out to all of them to learn
It's
how
a
to
great
cook.
cause, and it seems like you're sort of expanding the scope of how you're helping people. So if people listening to you right now want to help out with this organization, either as a volunteer or to donate funds, they can just reach out to the 요리 천사 website?
Yeah,
or,
it's 요리천사.org, YORICHUNSA.org.
Got that. All right. We have one of our listeners. There's a question of the day, and we're talking about this sweet, mostly spicy, really, right? Condiment, a red sauce that's used in tteokbokki or bibimbap. And 7439 seems to think it's gochujang. We won't exactly reveal if it's right or not, but they said 닭죽에 고추장을 살짝 넣어 드셔보세요. 추천합니다. What do you think about this?
Well, that sounds amazing. Takchik this morning sounds amazing. Yeah.
What do you think about I don't know, like Korean food overseas? I imagine, because like you said, it's especially New York, like a place where it's so metropolitan, they're open to different cuisines, and there are so many amazing restaurants. Where do you see Korean food and Korean restaurants going?
The future of cooking is Korean food. I think for so long all the chefs, all cuisines have been trying to make delicious food.
Yeah.
And most chefs now cook delicious food, and that's not a challenge anymore because of the accessibility of international ingredients anywhere. But I think the next step is about health. I mean, restaurants, chefs, we need to worry about our diners' health. And Korean food is based on healthy cooking.
Right.
It's based on fermentation. It's the best cuisine to be eating right now during this pandemic, because Korean food will help your immune system. So it's the future.
I think you should become an ambassador for Korean food, and that'll bring you back to Korea more often as well. Well, Hooni Kim, I want to thank you once again for taking the time to join us. It's been a pleasure, and I wish you the best of luck with all of your projects, and especially the 2 restaurants in New York.
Thank you so much, Sian.
Stay safe.